Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel, and today we are going to be talking about when you should bug out. And y'all, bugging out is one of those topics that if I were to just make one video on it, it would take like 2 or 3 hours, and I don't think anybody wants to sit through that. So this one is just going to be focused on situations that would require you to bug out, as well as other types of situations that could be warning signs that it may be something that you want to go ahead and do to kind of get ahead of the curve. If you're new to the channel, welcome, and if you've been by here before, welcome back. If you don't mind, consider subscribing to the channel now or sometime during the video where you think you got something useful out of it. And also, by that same token, go ahead and hit the like button as well anytime that you feel that you have gotten value from this. So, let's get started. Bugging out is one of those things that a lot of preppers, I think, tend to romanticize in our minds. We like to picture ourselves driving up the side of a mountain in this picturesque location, living off the land, and being able to forget about all of the stupid things about modern life that just annoy the mess out of us. We think of it as like a post-apocalyptic, simple life reset. But in most cases, it's probably not going to be that way. It's probably actually going to be a poop sandwich without the bread. During most bug outs, you're probably escaping some sort of weather event, so likely you're just going to a relative's house or a hotel a few hours away to escape the worst of the storm, but still be able to get back within a reasonable time frame. And if it is some sort of post-apocalyptic thing where society just doesn't come back, I think a lot of us, not all of us, some of you guys out there, I know you have mad, crazy outdoor wilderness survival and all these other skills, but a lot of folks out there don't. So I think a lot of people, if they were to get out there and have to live off the land, they would very quickly find out that they don't quite have the skill set to be able to manage that like they thought they did. So in most cases, bugging out should be considered a last resort, and other than like just the hazards and stuff that go along with bugging out, road conditions that could be problematic, then there's the human element of folks getting in your way or maybe wanting to do you harm in between here and there. But there's also the whole home is where your heart is, but more importantly, it's where all your gear is. It's where all your food, your water storage, and all that kind of stuff is located. And unless you're very well organized and you actually have some lead time, being able to know that, hey, you're probably going to need to bug out, you might have to leave a lot of that stuff behind. And even if, you do have lead time, maybe your car isn't big enough to hold everything that you wish that it could. So your bug out plan, it needs to be well rehearsed and well organized. And in addition to practicing it, you need to have your gear staged in a location where you know right where it's at, and it's not going to take all that much time to move from its storage location to your car. And also another thing a lot of folks don't think about with bugging out is you need to have a backup plan that in case you're at work, your kids are at school, you need to know, and your family needs to know, who's going to go pick up the kids, who's going to go to the house and pick things up. Do certain members of the family, maybe because of where they are, maybe they just go ahead and drive to a rendezvous location or maybe even the bug out location just to keep them safe and to reduce their, exposure to dangerous situations as much as possible. So getting into situations that would require you to bug out, the first one might seem like a cop-out to a lot of people, but in my mind, it's completely valid, and that is any time that something inside of you that you just cannot explain says, get out. And that is especially true if you're somebody who is normally calm, cool, and collected. You tend to think more than you feel, but there's just something that you can't put your finger on that is telling you to get you and your loved ones to safety. Human beings, we have finely tuned survival instincts, and many times to our own detriment, we ignore those because we're used to being in a society and a civilization that isn't necessarily about survival in the traditional sense. So if something in you says go, then you better go. The next situation in which you should definitely bug out is going to be if you were ordered to do so. And I know a lot of us, you don't want to be told what to do, especially by the government, and I get that. But most of the times, if you're being ordered to evacuate, then you probably should have done so a good while before that order was given. because most of the time the government does not want to do any sort of mandatory evacuation because it negatively affects the economy in other areas, and that can damage their reputation. So if they feel like the danger is significant enough to issue a mandatory evacuation, then it is definitely something that you want to listen to. The next situation where you should definitely bug out is going to be a hazmat incident. And those are on the table if you live near things like power plants, industrial areas, ports, or even near major highways or railroad tracks where harmful, dangerous substances may be transported. There have been numerous instances in different parts of the world where things like power plant meltdowns or chemical leaks have caused, severe illness and even death to some people. So even if there's something like an ammonia leak, you definitely need to get you and your family to safety, at least for the duration of that event. The next situation where you should definitely bug out is going to be certain weather events, certain natural disasters, and most of them either have to do with water or fire. So talking about things like flooding and hurricanes, there's really not much you can do about that. If you don't bug out in time, then you're either going to drown or you're going to be waiting on top of your roof for help to come. And when it comes to flooding, if you live in like a floodplain near a river, of course, that would be a concern. But when it comes to hurricanes, anytime that you live in the storm surge area, and that can be many miles inland, you need to be ready to bug out the second that you hear of a hurricane coming. You need to have everything packed, everything squared away, so that when you do make that decision to go, then everything's ready. And guys, hurricanes, those are not anything to play with. I'm sure if you live in a coastal area, you know that. Not only do you have the flooding that you have to worry about, but the winds can be every bit as strong as a tornado, especially if you were hit by the eye wall. And then when it comes to fire-based natural disasters, things like wildfires, then volcanoes, those are things that you really cannot do anything about. And in the case of wildfires, while many times you will have warning, once it reaches your area, those things can spread ridiculously fast, and you don't want to be caught in its wake. If you live in an area prone to volcanic activity, since there is so little warning for those a lot of the time, I would say that go ahead and keep all of your bug out gear staged in a room of your house. That is going to be very easy to move that gear from where it's stored to your car. I mentioned that earlier in the video, but if you live in an area with volcanic activity, I think it's especially important. And you might kind of have to trim down the stuff that you're wanting to take with you, or keep a lot of your survival gear in a trailer or something like that. So all you got to do is hook up and go. The next situation where you should definitely bug out is going to be if you feel that martial law could be implemented in your area. And there's a lot of reasons why you do not want to be in an area with martial law. First of all, you're going to have a lot of your individual rights taken away, at least for a short time, and in some cases it might be for a long time. And then also, if there is martial law in effect, there's a good chance that there's going to be other things that go along with that, such as unrest, and you definitely don't want you and your loved ones to be around that. And along those same lines, if you feel that there could be military conflict taking place in your area, you definitely want to get out as well. And another situation where you should definitely bug out is kind of a catch-all, and that's going to be any time that remaining where you are right now becomes unviable. And that could be for several different reasons. The first one that comes to my mind, at least, is if you are running low on supplies and there really is no way to obtain more supplies. And kind of like with the mandatory evacuation, if that's the situation that you're in, you should have bugged out a long time ago. And then another reason why remaining where you are becomes unviable, it could be because of security threats. Maybe the situation has gotten to the point where looters have reached your area. Maybe they've exhausted all the resources elsewhere and now they're coming to you. You want to get out before those people reach where you are so that you and your loved ones remain safe. And guys, there's probably a lot of other reasons why you definitely want to bug out. So if you thought of one I did not, go ahead and drop that in the comments below. Next, we're going to talk about some kind of gray areas where maybe you do want to bug out, but it might also be in your best interest to stay where you are. The first situation that I consider a gray area between bugging in and bugging out is going to be social unrest. In a lot of instances where there's social unrest, it is isolated to maybe one part of town, maybe downtown, and if you live in the suburbs, maybe you're not in as immediate of risk, so maybe you want to stay for one reason or another. But if you are very close to where that unrest is taking place, you probably want to consider leaving. And I know that there's a lot of folks watching this video. Since we were preppers or survivalists, we have this stand and fight sort of mentality. And I mean, you know, people are going to do what they want to do. But I would say that if you have family, especially smaller kids, then you really need to take their safety in mind, and also kind of keep in perspective that if something happens to you, then are they going to be in as good of a position to survive and prosper later in their lives without you in the picture? The next situation that I consider to be sort of a gray area is going to be if there was some sort of nuclear exchange. And my reasoning for considering that a gray area is just how fast ICBMs can travel. They can launch from one country, cross an ocean, and hit their target in kind of just a rough time frame of around 30 minutes. So from the time that it's launched, your government, whatever country you live in, is going to have to determine a missile was launched, this is its likely target, and we know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. And now we need to disseminate that information to the proper people who have to get it out to you. So really, in reality, just depending on how efficient your system is, you really might only have 15 or 20 minutes of advance warning. And if you live in a major metropolitan area, you can't get anywhere in 20 minutes under normal traffic. Just imagine how panicked everybody is going to be. So if you live in one of those types of areas, getting out and getting onto the road isn't really a viable way to survive, because you're likely going to be caught out in the open when that warhead hits. So that's going to be one of those shelter-in-place things. Now, on the other hand, if you live in a major metropolitan area and things are getting tense and it's looking like there could be some sort of situation like that, that is the time to get out. The next situation that I consider to be sort of a gray area is a pandemic. And there's a lot of different variables that would probably help you decide whether to go or to stay. Like, for instance, if you lived in the epicenter of a new breakout and it had a really high fatality rate, and you haven't been exposed yet, yeah, you probably want to get out to avoid that exposure. But if there's a situation like COVID, I mean, it's already everywhere. Where are you going to go? So really kind of weigh where it's at, where you are, the fatality rate, and what are you going to do if you have to bug out for several months at a time and society is still somewhat up and running. So in my mind, there's just a lot of kind of variables that make it so where it's not quite as black and white as at least what I thought it would be before 2019. Then there's also other situations that are more warning signs. Maybe just individually they aren't a reason to bug out, but when you see them coupled with other things as well as your knowledge of a particular situation, they could tell you that maybe it's time to go. And one of those is going to be any sort of panic buying. Panic buying at grocery stores, that's probably the one that comes to mind first, just because we've seen that a lot in the past couple years where there's been a lot of empty shelves where people scoop up all the canned goods, baby formula, and meat they can find. But it could also be other places. Like there could be runs on fuel where people hit the gas stations, try to fill up their cars, try to fill up their gas cans, so that they can either power their generators or get as far away as possible with their vehicles. And then even hardware stores. If you see people buying up all the lumber at like Home Depot or Lowe's, then there could be something coming your way that you don't want to be anywhere near once it gets there. Then also runs on banks. This is one that I think would be a definite sign that you might want to get somewhere less populated if you live in a major city. And, you know, people going and they're trying to get all their money out of the bank. then that means that there's probably going to be some pretty hefty unrest that follows soon thereafter. And another one is going to be failure of local utilities, especially if it's water, gas, electricity, and multiple utilities at once, and even more so if the failure of those utilities is unexplainable. You start to see utilities unavailable, then it might be a time to go somewhere maybe where there are utilities or somewhere with less people, because there could be any number of reasons why that's taking place. If everything just drops like a rock all at once, then you have to think of the possibility maybe there was an EMP, maybe there was some sort of cyber attack. And once people can't get water and they can't charge their iPhone for a couple days, they're going to get pretty cranky, so you want to get away from them. Another situation that could serve as a warning that you probably want to get out is going to be if trucks and trains stop running, because as we all know, the world is 9 meals away from anarchy. If people can't get their Rice Krispies and their bologna sandwiches for 3 days, then they're going to start to get antsy, and we're probably not going to like the way that they behave as a result, so you may want to consider getting out if that takes place. And the last warning sign that I want to talk about kind of goes along with the martial law situation and the military conflict that I mentioned earlier, but that's if you notice any sort of unusual military or police activity happening in your area, because that could be a precursor to several different things. Of course, it could be a precursor to martial law, could be a precursor to military conflict, but it could also happen before some sort of large-scale social unrest that you don't want to be around. And if you do decide to bug out, being able to blend in and not stick out is going to be a major advantage to you and help keep yourself and your loved ones safe. You can learn more about the gray man concept for you as well as your vehicle by clicking this card. Y'all have a good one. Thanks again.